Oh, thank you. I didn't expect it that quickly. Anyway, a chuinúisle a cháirde bhhailm fáilte ar fé, agus fé de chorróid ar fád an seo. It's wonderful not just to be back in business, but to have the gallery open and to see people coming in as well. It's just wonderful and thrilling. And no better way really to get us going than with an exhibition by John Behan. It's John's first solo exhibition with us was actually 50 years ago. Wow. This year. But we were showing his work before that. So it makes it even more special, and more special because the standard keeps going up and up and up. And it's a genuine thrill to have his work back. And also a thrill, I have to say, to open the exhibition, to have with us a man who's always in the news, Bryan Dobson, a man of great culture, very well read, knows a lot of artists, works with a lot of artists and writers, and a genuine pleasure to have him. He is driven from Dublin to be here, especially this evening. So would you welcome, please, Bryan Dobson.
Take off my Mondrian mask. There's an idea for your next exhibition, John. You might get into the mask business. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, John, for the invitation to be here for this opening this evening. As Tom says, the 50th anniversary exhibition of John Behan at the Kenny Gallery. It's been just such an extraordinary collaboration, Kenny's and John Behan, over those 5 decades, particularly in the years, I think, John, since you moved to live here in Galway. It's a relationship that has flourished and to which we have all been the beneficiaries, to be able to see these exhibitions over the years and appreciate them and enjoy on an annual or sometimes 2 or 3 times a year the products of John's wonderful hands. I'm honoured to be here because I've always been an admirer of John's work. And to be able to be with you this evening is something that something I was delighted to be asked to do. Honoured also because the last of your openings, John, I don't know if you remember, before the pandemic struck. The last I was at, anyway, was in the Solomon Gallery in Dublin, and no less a personage than Uachtaráin na hÉireann and Michael D. Higgins turned up to attend. And I suppose that at the time struck me as something that was right and fitting. Michael D. and John, of course, are friends over many years, but for our first citizen to be there to honour one of our great artistic treasures was to me something that was entirely appropriate. And John's work, his output over those 50 years has really been quite extraordinary. He has a tremendous output and a tremendous work ethic, which I'd like to say a thing or two about in a moment. But his output, his work over 4, 5, 6 decades has created, as we all know, some of the images that are just iconic for us as Irish people. The famine ships, the bull, the public sculptures, which we can see on both sides of the Atlantic on many of our towns and cities, which are passed every day and seen and appreciated by many thousands of people, not to mention the works that have gone out into people's homes and into galleries over so many years. As Tom said, John's first exhibition here was 50 years ago, but he had exhibited a little bit before that. And I was curious to try to find out what was the initial reception to the young John Behan as he began to exhibit in the late 1960s and the early 1970s. And of course, being a journalist, I did a little bit of research, a little bit of investigative journalism. And I managed to lay my hands on this small booklet, John Behan, Poet of Structure. And it includes some account of the reaction to an exhibition that was staged in the Project Gallery in October, as it happens, 1969.
Correct.
I think it was a group exhibition, is that correct, John? Or was it your first solo?
No, it was the first solo exhibition.
Your first solo exhibition?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you were yet 30 years old at that stage, but you were...
I was just about.
Heading towards it. So a young, just under 30 sculptor exhibits in the Project Art Centre, October 1969. Let's start with the Irish Times. On the strength of his exhibition in the Project Gallery, it's hard to deny him a place among the very best Irish sculptors. October 1969. The Sunday Press, perhaps with an eye more to the popular newspaper Margaret, said the bulk of these works are charged with romping energy and virility, no less. The Evening Press, an inspiring and exciting announcement of strong, disciplined visions, power and strength are very much the themes that produce his best work. He elects to make them imply their presence rather than express it in violence. And finally, the Evening Herald. The prongs of an old hoe, a piece of unwanted gas ring, and similar items of scrap metal may not at first glance seem to be adequate artist's materials, but in the hands of 31-year-old Dublin sculptor John Behan, always knock a few years off John. In the hands of 31-year-old Dublin sculptor John Behan, they become part of an animal or a figure. More than 50 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, the critics were unanimous that a major, important and significant artistic voice had arrived on the scene. And it has a voice that has been heard clearly and loudly in the more than 5 decades since. Not least because John's output is really quite extraordinary. This is the product of the months of lockdown, but it's the second of his exhibitions of the lockdown period. And John has continued to work throughout the lockdown 7 days a week, as he has worked all his life. He has a disciplined approach to his work. I suppose, particularly for a sculptor, John, it's 80% perspiration and 20% inspiration. It's a physical business. It's the most physical of the plastic arts. It is the product of sinew and of muscle, as well as of brain and eye and sensibility. And it requires a disciplined approach and a rigorous approach, which John has exemplified through all those years. I don't know, John, if you've ever done a self-portrait, but to me, there's one series that could be described as representing you and the artist you are, and that is the figures that you made of Vincent van Gogh. And if you recall them, ladies and gentlemen, the figure of Van Gogh is seen striding out, probably across the fields, with his easel and his canvases strapped to his back and his bag of paints and brushes hanging over his shoulder. And what we know about Van Gogh is that he too was a very disciplined artist. Despite the perhaps popular image of him, he was somebody who was serious about the work that he undertook. He was disciplined about it. He began first thing in the morning. He worked through the day until late at night, until he had mastered what he sought to master. And if I'm looking for a self-portrait of you, John, to me it's in those Van Gogh images. And John's themes over the years have ranged far and wide. They're repeated, some of them, along with new themes in this exhibition that we see here this evening. Of course, the Famine Ships, there's a wonderful array of them here, a fleet. Am I counting 4 or 5 of the seven? They're all around me, one behind me as well. And they have been a key component of John's work now since, I think, the mid-1990s, around the time of the 150th anniversary of the famine. And they are emblematic of his work, and they are, I think, certainly one of those images that has seared their way onto our national consciousness, because they say so much about our shared history, but also say so much about the capacity of the human individual to survive and to endure. I look at these ones with the skeletal figures arrayed along the rigging, and I think of those who travelled in the famine ships and brought with them the memory of those they had left behind, the memory of those who have died. And it seems to me John represents that in the way these figures are spread across the rigging. The memory of the dead, the memory of those who have not made it to the famine ship, who have not made it to the far side, but their memory is carried. And it's a memory that all of us will understand and recognise the significance of. And for me as well, a ship and a boat says so much more about the human condition. It to me speaks of the need for collaboration and cooperation. Generally ships are made but with people working together. They're rarely the product of one person, and they are sailed and they are journeyed as well in collaboration. and they bring people together. They cross the oceans. I do a bit of sailing, and for me, the sea is not a barrier, but a highway. And John represents in his work, it seems to me, the highway. And in all of his work, whether figures appear or not, it seems to me the human presence is there. The human presence is implicit in the work. I think of the oar boats, and if you look at the figure, if you look at those, you can imagine somebody has just got up and left the oars behind, and they will soon return and pick them up, and the boats will head out across the ocean. And then, of course, more recently, John, you have drawn this line between our famine experience all those years ago and what you've witnessed, and you've witnessed it firsthand in the Aegean Sea, in the refugee crisis that you have documented in some of your more recent work. It was maybe 3 or 4 years ago in the RHA that you exhibited, I saw first, the pieces based around the refugee crisis, and to me you stole the show that particular year in the RHA. So you've drawn this thread, and in doing that you not only connect what's happening now in that part of the world with our experience of 150 or more years ago, but you also draw that common thread of shared humanity that is the legacy of all of us right around the globe. And then a word about your Seamus Heaney corner over here, if I can describe it as that. Yourself and Seamus were great friends. You served together on the Arts Council, and I think you told me 2 different terms. And Seamus, as was the case with you, was somebody who was concerned with the, if you like, the politics of the arts. You are, as he was, an arts activist, someone who believed it was important to campaign and argue for the prominence of the arts in our public life. And it's lovely to see Seamus Heaney himself represented, and one of his poems, Digging, one of his earliest poems, I think is the inspiration for some of those pieces. So I want to congratulate you, John, on a tremendous exhibition. You are someone who has given us great joy and pleasure over the years. You have challenged us, you have engaged us, you have surprised us in so many different ways with your work, and we wish that certainly will continue for many years yet to come. Because you've celebrated Seamus Heaney here this evening, I'd like to, if I might, maybe end with a Seamus Heaney poem. And during the lockdown, one of the things I did is I took to reading poetry and then trying to remember some of it. So that's just a private little thing I was doing. But one of the poems I tried to remember, and we'll see whether I was successful or not in a moment, was, I think, one that particularly speaks to the value of the artist in our community, the capacity to surprise us and delight us and catch us unawares. And the poem is called Postscript. And sometime, take the time to drive out west into County Clare along the flaggy shore in October or September, when the light and the wind play off against each other so that the ocean on one side is alive with foam and glitter, and inland among stones the surface of a slate grey lake is lit by the earth lightning of a flock of swans, their feathers ruffed and ruffling white on white, their fully grown, headstrong looking heads tucked or cresting or busy underwater. Useless to think you'll park and capture it more fully, you are neither here nor there, a hurry through which things known and strange, through which known and strange things pass, as big soft buffetings come at the car sideways and catch the heart off guard and blow it open. John, you have been catching our hearts off guard and blowing them open for very many decades now. For that we thank you and hope dearly that you will continue doing so for very many years to come.
Thank you, Bryan. That was a symphony. Wonderful. Just wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. I'm terribly sorry that we can't give you any wine this evening. We're saving a fortune on you because looking around, I see quite a number of topers. But just thank you for your attention, and please enjoy the exhibition.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm telling you.